So 2020 has been a weird year, and we're going to take a look at, even though it's, despite the fact we had a shortened season per se, we're going to take a look at the recent finalists for the 2020 NHL Awards. We'll take a look at some of those categories in this video. If you like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey and want to see the latest news around the NHL, make sure you give this video a thumbs up and a subscribe down below. Let's take a look at the finalists for the 2020 NHL Awards. Alright, so the other day, make sure, if you haven't checked out that video, what are you doing? We made a video talking about the Vezina finalist. It got its own video because that's really the only one we found out about. But now in the most recent days, we found out the other finalists for the other trophies here in the 2020 NHL Awards. So starting things off, we're going to start with the young guys, the guys that get to skate on the ice first for the first time, do a couple laps. Their first game, we're going to take a look at the Calder Trophy for the rookie, the best rookie of the year. We'll take a look at Avalanche defenseman Cale Makar, Canucks defenseman Quinn Hughes, and Blackhawks left winger Dominic Kubalik. Now, all three of these guys had pretty impressive seasons, and it's not fair because Cale Makar did play in the Stanley Cup playoffs in 2019 last year with the Avs, but he's still considered a rookie, just like Matt Murray when he was in the conversation a couple of years back after winning a Stanley Cup, but he was still going into his full-on rookie season, so kind of weird how that works. But three pretty solid players. I mean, let's just bring out the fact that these guys have really, like I said, Makar had a little bit of an edge, but really, I mean, looking at Makar, he leads all rookies in points per game with a 0.88 goals for each game. Hughes led all rookies in assists with 45 assists and in points, as well as 53 points. Not to mention the most power play points as well, 25 of those on the year. He only played 68 games on the season, but Kubalik leads all rookies in goals with 30 goals. So to say it's a pretty good competition between all three of these guys, if you look at the eye test, I'm probably going to say Quinn Hughes. Now, Quinn Hughes is, the fact that he's leading in assists and points and all these different things, it's going to be hard to knock him off of there. Cale Makar might have an edge because of the hype he had last season. He might have been able to keep his name out there long enough where enough people will vote for him for that first, be that first ballot in there. So we'll see what happens there. And Dominic Kubalik, I'm really happy that he got on this list. He may not win the award. I think he's he's the least likely out of the three, but he's still a very talented player, and he really showed what he could do there with the Blackhawks. He was fitting in perfectly there for the Blackhawks. He was getting a lot of minutes, which I'm sure he didn't mind too much. So it was a really solid season for Dominic Kubalik. Definitely the black ace out of these three guys, but he put up a really impressive season. And not to mention, I think the best player long-term out of these three guys, I'm going to say Cale Makar. I think Cale Makar is the best player, but I like what Quinn Hughes did this season. It's hard to ignore that, and I think he's going to win the Calder Trophy. So now we move on to the Jack Adams, and this is an interesting trophy, as it is the best head coach, it's a weird category because you look at, there's always a team in there, and we'll be taking a look at that in a minute, there's always a team that, was overachieved, and last season, it was the New York Islanders with Barry Trotz. Just how they turned around, made the playoffs, got to the second round. Inevitably got swept by the Hurricanes, but we forget about that part. But they still put up a pretty impressive season there, despite losing John Tavares, despite changing, really the ownership changed. Their owner died. The head coach was changed. The general manager was changed. There was just a lot of change there for the Islanders. And they gave it to Barry Trotz. And now this season, we've got Bruins head coach Bruce Cassidy, and I think he's one of the top 10 coaches in the NHL, maybe even top 5. He's a really solid head coach there for the Boston Bruins. The success that they've had under him, there's been talk that maybe, if the Bruins don't go on another deep run this year, there might be some talks about what may be going on with Bruce Cassidy. Maybe his comfort slows down a little bit. The expectations are high there in Boston, but I really like what Bruce Cassidy has done there with the Boston Bruins, it's definitely a worthy candidate. Then we've got the Flyers head coach, Alain Vigneault. Now, Vigneault is always up in this conversation. Look what he did a couple of years back with the Vancouver Canucks. He sent them to the Stanley Cup final in 2012. In 2016, 17, he went there with the New York Rangers. And now, if history repeats itself, he should be getting to the Stanley Cup Finals sometime here with the Philadelphia Flyers. So we'll see what happens with Alain Vigneault. They had some really great players really take the next step this season. Guys like Sean Couturier, guys like Travis Konechny, a guy like Joel Farabee down in the system that really came up out of nowhere. So Carter Hart in between the pipes. So the Philadelphia Flyers, you could say a lot of that is, the players working harder and things like that, the culture changing, but a lot of that you could give the credit to Alain Vigneault for what he's done there in Philadelphia. So now we've got that guy that I was talking about earlier, the guy that, going into the season, the expectations weren't all that high and just see how it goes. Well, that's what the Columbus Blue Jackets looked like going into this season, and they're going to be playing in the play-in round this year against the Toronto Maple Leafs. So we're going to be taking a look at head coach John Tortorella. Tortorella is always in this conversation. He's one of the best coaches in the league. He's one of those guys that, he's old school. He kind of pushes his players really hard, and I think that's needed for certain teams. And I think just Tortorella fits really well there in Columbus. They've all bought in. They are a very difficult team to play against, just the way they play. It's not a team that you're happy to play against. Maybe you want to sit that night. I'm not feeling that well. I'm scratched for tonight. But all kidding aside, I think the Columbus Blue Jackets, the fact that they're playing the Toronto Maple Leafs in the play-in round, some people would say the edge goes to the Leafs because they're just more talented. Others would say, the agitative, aggressive nature of the Columbus Blue Jackets actually gives them the edge in this little play-in round with the Leafs. So we'll see what happens, but I really like what Tortorella has done there with the Columbus Blue Jackets. So now we're going to move on. We're going to take a look at the Ted Lindsay Award, as this is the award voted on the players and is given to the league's most outstanding player. Now, this is an interesting trophy. We'll be taking a look at some of the candidates here. We've got Oilers center Leon Draisaitl, Avalanche center Nathan MacKinnon, and New York Rangers left winger Artemi Panarin. Now, I think all three of these guys easily are in the conversation for winning this trophy. I can't even decide for myself, really, who's going to win this. It really comes down to how things go, but all three of these guys are really solid, and there was a lot of hype around Edmonton Oilers center Leon Draisaitl this season. He was talked about more than Connor McDavid. Now, there was always the talk, once Connor McDavid went down with those injuries, there was a lot of talk, are the Oilers going to survive? Leon Draisaitl is only good on his line with Connor McDavid. Well, he really rewrote the script there this season for the Edmonton Oilers and really changed that narrative that he is the best player. He had the most points this season in the NHL. He had a really impressive campaign and is a big reason why the Edmonton Oilers are fifth in the Western Conference this season. So now we move on to the Avalanche. The Colorado Avalanche's center, Nathan MacKinnon. And there's no surprise he's here. He may be the best, maybe the second, third best player. It depends on where you put Crosby ahead of him or not. I think he may be the second best player in the NHL at this point behind Connor McDavid. Nathan MacKinnon is just so solid. The abilities that MacKinnon has shown since his rookie season, just how talented he is, his speed, it is deadly. And the Colorado Avalanche won big at that draft, picking up Nathan MacKinnon. He had an unbelievable season this year. He was fifth in the league with 93 points on the season, 35 goals, and 58 assists. And he had 29 multi-point games, scoring points in 53 of his 69 games this season. So pretty impressive stats there for Nathan MacKinnon. So now we move on to the New York Rangers' big acquisition, their big fish pickup in the 2019 NHL free agency period, where they picked up Artemi Panarin. And Artemi Panarin is a really good candidate here as well. I mean, the way he turned the things around for the New York Rangers this year, it's quite impressive. I mean, you look at a guy like Artemi Panarin, he was third in the league with 95 points on the year, 32 goals, 63 assists, in 69 games played this season. He led the NHL in even strength points, 71 points, and he led in all forwards in plus minus with a plus 36. So Artemi Panarin is the real deal, and this is a big pickup for the New York Rangers last offseason. He really turned things around. I think he brought a new light into a guy like Mika Zibanejad, just that lightning rod that Zibanejad needed, and Zibanejad had a really solid season as well. I think a lot of that is complemented because of how good of a year we saw from Artemi Panarin, and hopefully Capo Caco can continue that for the New York Rangers. So now we move on to the Lady Byng Trophy. Trophy given to the player exhibiting the most gentlemanly conduct and sportsmanship. So we've got three pretty solid candidates here. You've got Colorado Avalanche center Nathan MacKinnon. He's up here again for another award. The Maple Leafs center Austin Matthews. And the St. Louis Blues center Ryan O'Reilly. Now, this is an interesting trophy because you've got three guys that are really solid dudes. And I think there's a very good possibility that we see the Ted Lindsay go to Nathan MacKinnon. I'm not saying, there's a chance that we see Draisaitl get it as well. But I really like Nathan MacKinnon in that category as well. So I don't know if MacKinnon's going to necessarily win this. You've got the Maple Leafs, Austin Matthews. But the thing is, when I think of the Lady Byng Trophy, who are the names that you typically think of? And more likely than not, it's usually the guy with the St. Louis Blues and Ryan O'Reilly. I think he's just one of those guys that he's just such a down-to-earth dude. Seems like a guy I'd love to go have a couple drinks with. He seems like a really nice dude, and I think this is his award. They may rename this trophy when he retires to the Ryan O'Reilly Award. I mean, he just perfectly represents the Lady Byng Trophy. I think this is his trophy to lose. This is his trophy. Let's go on to the next one. So now we've got the Frank J. Selke Trophy, who is given to the player who best excels in the defensive aspects of the game. Now, this is interesting. Now, this is a forward category for the best defensive type player. Usually, when you think of the Selke Trophy, you think of guys like Los Angeles Kings, Andrei Kopitar, Boston Bruins, Patrice Bergeron. Back in the day, Pavel Datsyuk. Or Henrik Zetterberg. So these are the kind of guys you're usually talking about in this category. Speaking of that, number one guy on the ballot for this is Patrice Bergeron from the Boston Bruins. There's no shock here. He's always in this category. This is another one like Ryan O'Reilly with the Lady Byng. They could rename the trophy to the Patrice Bergeron Trophy down the road. He just perfectly exemplifies this. He is one of the best two-way forwards in the NHL. A great penalty killer, he's a bulldog. He's always fighting in the corners. He's just a great asset there for the Boston Bruins. As he continues to age, that's slowed down a little bit, but he still is an invaluable piece for the Bruins and for all the success they've had over the past couple of years. Now we look at someone that we haven't seen on this list, and we may be seeing him more often than not moving forward. I really like what Sean Couturier has done with the Philadelphia Flyers this past season. When we talked about him earlier in the Alain Vigneault with the Jack Adams, he was one of those players that really excelled this year with the Philadelphia Flyers. Their new system and everything that they're doing there in Philly has really been a nice compliment there for Sean Couturier. He has really turned his game to the next level. And I think there's a really good opportunity for him. Even if he doesn't win the trophy, I think we're going to start talking about him in this category more often than not in the next couple of years. And then we've got the St. Louis Blues center Ryan O'Reilly. He's up here again. This is another one where Ryan O'Reilly, we talked about how he won all the awards last season. There's a reason for that because he just perfectly exemplifies these trophies. And again, a very defensive player, a very defensive forward that really, he can put the puck in the net, but he's also very reliable on his own end. And you talk about coaches, especially old school coaches, they want that type of player. He perfectly exemplifies that in his mentality. Ryan O'Reilly, this is another one. It's going to be tough. I really like Sean Couturier on this list. He's kind of an underdog, though, so I feel like that's why I like him there. But Ryan O'Reilly and Patrice Bergeron, those are some heavy-hitting customers there for Couturier to put up with here in the Selke Trophy this year. All right, and then we go on to the Norris Trophy for the best defenseman in the NHL, and this one's another interesting one because you look at the three names on this list, I'm not totally shocked. I think all three of these guys played really well, and it's hard. There's always the debate. Is it the Norris Trophy? What is the best defenseman? Is it the defenseman that's the best defensive defenseman, or is it the defenseman that's the best offensive defenseman, puts up the most points? So that's something that people have continued to argue about year after year. There's a lot of, it's a pretty polarizing subject to talk about there. But it's definitely interesting to see these names on the list. As starting things off, we got the Washington Capitals, D-man John Carlson. Carlson's been a very solid defenseman there for the Washington Capitals. A huge piece for them when they won the Stanley Cup back in 2018. And John Carlson is really one of the best defensemen in the NHL. Ever since he signed that contract, people were a little concerned about would he live up to that deal. He's definitely doing that right now with the Washington Capitals. So now we move on to the Tampa Bay Lightning's defenseman Victor Hedman. And Victor Hedman, ever since he was drafted, we knew he was going to be a solid defenseman. It took him a little bit of a while to develop, but Victor Hedman is a really solid candidate. There's another name that I think he kind of gets, his name gets watered a little bit because you look at Tampa, you've got all these talented guys. Even just looking at the blue line, you've got McDonough, Sergachev, Girardi. I mean, you've got some decent defensemen already on that in that group. So a guy like Hedman, yes, he's definitely the best out of all those guys, I would say, but he definitely doesn't get talked about as much because of how solid that blue line is already there in Tampa. And then we've got the Nashville Predators defenseman Roman Josi. Roman Josi is one of those guys that you got to leave him on the list. He's always on the list for a reason because he's a solid defenseman. And, if I'm going to be quite honest, he may win this trophy. And again, though, it depends on how the NHL looks at best defenseman. If we're looking at best offensive defenseman, I think we're taking a look at John Carlson. If we're taking a look at best defenseman, in the NHL this year, specifically this year, it's hard not to say Roman Josi. He had a really solid season this year with the Predators. Things didn't go so well for them this year. They probably would have liked to be a little higher in the standings. We'll see how they do in the play-in round this year with the Yotes. But we'll have to wait and see how that goes there for the best defenseman in the NHL. And then we've got the Vezina Trophy, which we talked about. I already talked about, but I might as well quickly recap it real quick. Vezina Trophy, best goaltender in the NHL. And that's quite easy because we've got Tuukka Rask of the Boston Bruins, Connor Hellebuyck of the Winnipeg Jets, and Andrei Vasilevskiy of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Out of all three, I like all three. But looking at the stats, I really liked what Tuukka Rask did. Some people didn't like that I wore his jersey in the video, the Bruins jersey. Oh, he was going to pick Rask. Yeah, but he had a pretty solid season this year with the Boston Bruins, so it's hard not to put him in that conversation. And that's just it right there. So now, let's keep this thing moving along. Oh, that's it. So that's it for this video. Comment down below. What do you think of these finalists for the 2020 NHL Awards? Who got snubbed? Somebody always gets snubbed of these awards. Let me know in the comment section down below. Who do you think is going to win these trophies this year? And if you like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, want to see the latest news around the NHL, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and a subscribe down below. And if you haven't subscribed already, what are you doing here? No, I'm kidding. But thank you for watching and have a great day.